Alright, so this video is going to be about database functions. It's not going to be about any particular database function, it's mostly just understanding criteria and fields in database functions, and once you figure that out, it's pretty much going to be the same for all of them. So for example, there are some database functions like dget, dsum, dcount, max, all of those. I'm not going to talk about any particular one. I guess I'll give some examples using dcount. Or maybe I'll use dcounter to do alphanumeric count. With any of these functions, whichever one you decide to use, if you open the function, you will see that the first argument is going to be a database. And what a database means, it's basically going to be a table that's going to have the first row as headers on top. So for example, I could just select this table. Well, if I do this right, I could. So let's try this again. So that's going to be my table. So in this selection, the first row is this headers in this table. And we need to make sure that those headers exist. And we don't want to duplicate any of those headers. So if you have a column called region, we don't want another column called region. Comma moves us to the second argument. The second argument is going to be the field we want to work with. So the end result is going to be coming from this field. Now, in this particular case, because I'm using the count function, I'll be selecting the column I'll be counting. For example, I'll just select the category column. So I'll do category in quotes. So I'm basically matching the column name that's in this data set. So category, comma. And finally, the last thing here is the criteria in this function. For now, I'm just going to close parentheses, hit enter. I'm going to come back and put that criteria in there in a second. So what a criteria is going to be, it's going to be a range where you have the column name followed by the criteria. So for example, if I just copy this and paste it over here, see I have category, that's this column on top, and I have the value, which is this shoe accessories. So if I go back and go to this last argument of this function after the comma, I'm going to close this and select this range as a criteria, the first one being the heading, the second one being the value. I hit enter. It's going to count how many of those we can find. So right now in this data set, see, apparently there is one. So if I scroll down, I shouldn't be able to find any others. But if I change this to skirts, for example, see the count updated to 2 because there is one here. And if I scroll down, there is another one here. What's interesting about the way this criteria works, which can be really confusing, is that if I just type something like baby here, see I get 5. So if you look here, there is really no matches for just baby. But what it's doing when you do something like this is just getting things that start with baby. So right now, see it's counting this one. It's not going to count this one because this one doesn't start with baby. It has baby in it, but it's going to be 1 for this. I'm just going to make it bold. It's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5. So we get 5 because we have 5 starting with that word baby. So if we wanted things that are exactly equal to that, what we have to do, let's actually just change one of these to baby as well. So now I have 6 because this also starts with baby. So if I go back here and do, instead of baby, I do equals baby, I get an error message because now it starts using a formula here instead of saying equals baby. So I want this to be just text, so I'm going to just add an apostrophe in front of this and hit enter. So now my cell is just going to read as the text equals baby. So right now, see, we get 1 because there's one that's exactly that, which is this one. So if I copy this and paste it, for example, over here, now we have 2. So when you put the equal sign in front of that value, then you basically get an exact match. It is still not going to be case sensitive. So if I do lowercase, it's still going to match. Now, I could also use some wildcards here. So if I go here and add a star, see, I get 7. And what it's doing again, it's basically getting us anything that starts with that word. So 1, 2, 3, then we have 4, 5, 6, and 7. What I could do, I could also go here and add another star here. And now we have contains baby, which means 1, and then 2, 3. So it's also going to count these where we have baby in the middle. And then if you do something like this, then it's going to be basically anything that ends with the word baby, which is going to be like this one, and that's pretty much it because we don't really have anything that ends with the word baby. So if we just go and type something like this, see, it's going to add up to this. Now we have 3. I'm going to undo that. So we can do starts with, ends with. You can also do multiple of the stars like this. Some characters here, then BA, then some characters, then Y, and so on. So you can do stuff like this basically, and you can use some wildcards. I'm going to get back to what it was. But one thing to remember again, if you simply just type the word, it basically is the same as doing equals baby star. So that's kind of interesting how that works, and I couldn't find any mention in documentation that this is how it's supposed to work, but that's the way it actually works. So I can go here, and in addition to this one, I can just add another one. I'm going to do something like shoe, and then I'm going to go back and change my criteria range. Instead of being like this 2 cells, I'm going to go one more down to H8 to include this whole range. So again, the first one in here should be the column name, which is category from our data set, and then the values go after that. So if I hit enter, I get 10. So in this case, because we're just basically putting the words, it's going to be anything that starts with this. So basically it's going to be this, shoe, starts with shoe, 1, and then baby, 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So anything that starts with baby or shoe. So essentially, this ends up being an or statement. You're saying either this or this. And if you want it to match exactly, again, you would do the equal sign. The apostrophe, I'm just adding apostrophe just to force this to go as text. But really, we're just doing equal sign and the word. So I have this, so now we have just 2 that match this, and I can do stars for this one, and here we go. All right, so this is the way you do OR statements. So basically you do the column name, and then you follow by different options, so you could go more here. But you could also do AND statements in this particular case. Let's do an example. So you can go here and add another column, sales rep, and then do a sales rep here. So if I do something like John, basically we're saying we want things that start with the word baby, and then it's going to be John. But this is right now not going to work in our statement because we didn't include that in our range. So we need to go back and update this to the range like this. That includes the new column. So now if I hit enter, see I get 4. Now that's interesting. Now we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we get a count of 4. So let me just type some random stuff here. So now this is an AND statement together. This is an AND statement together. So basically for this one, see we get no matches for shoe and this. And for these two, it's also getting no matches. So it doesn't think that the category baby and sales rep John is a match. That's because we don't have one. So yeah, so that doesn't start with baby. We did just baby with the equal sign, which means we're going to have to do a star here. So now that starts with baby, or we can just remove the equal sign, which should be the same thing. So now if I remove this, see we get a 5. That's actually correct. So when you don't provide anything as one of your criterias, that basically says don't use it as a filter. So in this case, blank means we're going to ignore sales rep in this particular shoe case. But if we wanted to make sure that when it's shoe, we only want to count the ones that are for Isabella, we can also go here and add Isabella. And again, this should be, to be completely accurate about this, it should start with an equal sign to just pick up John or Isabella. Otherwise, it starts with John or starts with Isabella there. So okay, so that's pretty much how it's gonna work. So you can just keep adding more. So the more columns you add here, that's another AND statement that's gonna match all of these combinations together. A couple of other things I want to show you. Now, let's say I want to do this count using the sales column. So I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna remove this for now, and as well as these options. So I'll just change my criteria to be these two cells highlighted together. So now it gets us 21 because when we have a blank, it basically doesn't use it as a criteria. So that means it's just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's pretty much going to count all of these because there are no blanks. And count will count anything that's not blank. So for example, if this one was blank, see, this will be 20 because it's not going to count blanks. And it's counting values in the column we selected here, category. So if I switch this to, for example, region, it's going to count this column. So it's going to be 21 again. Get back to this. So now, well, I could do the same things. I could do equals to something like I did before. But I could also do things like this. I could do greater than a certain number, like 500. And see, it finds there are 20 of them greater than 500, and that kind of makes sense because the only one that's less than 500 is basically this one. You can do greater than or equal to, or you can do less than. You can do less than or equal to. So if I change this number to, let's say, 2000, we got 2 of them. So 1, 2. What's also interesting about this is that when you have situations like this, so let's say this number here is 1,000. Okay, now we have 3 of them, less than 2,000. But if I type something like 10, see, with numbers, now it doesn't work the same way it works with text. So with text, it would do anything that starts with 10, and it would pick up the rest. But with numbers, when you just type 10, it basically means equals to. So if I do 1,000, it's going to match because that's a match for this number. So again, this is formatting, makes it look like dollar amounts, but we could just make these do plain, or we could just format both of them as currency to make them look nice and pretty. But either way, this works as an equal if you have numbers, which means if I go here and do apostrophe equals to 1,000, see, I'm getting the same results. Even though I might have another like 10,000 here, which kind of starts with 1,000, but doing this is still going to get us 1. So again, now we can do greater than, less than. We can also do not equal to, doing this. So there are 20 numbers that are not 1,000, and that gives us the count. You can also do multiple filters again as AND. So I could do numbers that are greater than 5,000. And then I could say, let's pick the region Midwest. And I have to update my range. So there are 3. And again, this should have an equal sign in front. If you wanted to do between, you could repeat the same column. So I can do sales twice, and I could do greater than 5,000 for one and less than 8,000 for the other. And now we have numbers between 5 and 8,000. Numbers between 1,000 and 8,000. So there are 12 of them. Now if I do greater than or equal to, it should also include this one, so it should be 13. That's pretty much the whole idea of the criteria, how this database function criteria work. So the last thing I'm going to mention about this criteria is that you don't necessarily have to do this criteria as a range. You can also build the criteria as an array. So if I didn't want to have this in here typed, I could just go as the last argument here. Let's scroll right a little bit. And remove this range, start with a curly bracket, and build this range as an array. So I'm going to start with a column name. So the column name is sales. So now if I want to go to this, just this first two, semicolon, and then after the semicolon, I do the value. So the value I'm matching to is greater than or equal to 1000. So if I hit enter right now, it's going to give me any number that's greater than or equal to 1000. So yeah, that's pretty much all of them with exception of this one. Now, if you wanted to do something with this thing, when I have two columns, so rows are separated with a semicolon, and the columns are going to be separated with a comma, or it could be also like this thing if you're in a different time zone, but for me it's a comma. So what do? You first do your columns. So I'm going to do sales, and the second column for me is also called sales. So I'm going to repeat that twice. But if this was, let's say, the sales rep column, I would type sales rep in the second column. And then I move with my semicolon to my rows. So this is the first argument in my rows, greater than or equal to 1000. And then I'm going to do a comma and do the second argument again in quotes. I could do less than 8000. And this way I have the whole thing built inside of this array in my statement. So I'm not using the range. You could also pick and choose, like you could choose some parts to be a part of your array, some parts to be coming from your cells. So for example, I could remove this part and click on this, and that would just pick up that less than 8000 out of there, and it would work too. So this type of stuff works. So the same way, if I wanted to, let's say, just have 1000 value, but I don't want to type greater than or equal to 1000, I could just go someplace and type 1000. And then in my formula, I could do concatenation. So I could remove the 1000 here, and then I could use ampersand to concatenate this 1000 to it. So now we're using that cell value 1000, and we're doing greater than or equal to because of this in our statement. So if I change this from 1000 to, let's say, 5000, now we have numbers between 5000 and whatever I had there. So it was like this number, less than 8000. So you can do all kinds of stuff like this to work with this criteria. And if you're trying to kind of make this work going forward, so this range, as you add new data, it's going to work, you can just remove this end row reference like this, and it's still going to work the same way. So that's pretty much the core of this. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to match a blank. I'm going to delete a couple of things here. So let's say I'm trying to sum up all these numbers when this is blank in the category. So for this, instead of the count, we would use the sum. And again, the first one is going to be the range, which is going to be this data set. So I'm going to replace the row reference in the end to send this all the way down. And then the field you want to get the results from. In this case, we're trying to sum results, which is sales. So I'm just going to do sales. That's the field, comma. And then finally, the criteria. So the criteria is going to be, I'm going to make sure that it's the column category. And then semicolon to do the row. And I want anything that's blank in this column. So if you remember, if we just leave this like this, so if I do closing and close parentheses like this, double quotes here, I'm going to hit enter. So I got this number, $104,000. So that's definitely not these two. It's basically all of these, because remember, when I leave blank as an argument, that basically means don't do anything. So what we could do, we could go in here and do an equal sign and just leave the rest open. So we're saying equals to nothing. So if I do this and hit enter, see, it's basically this plus this. So that's how you could match blanks if you have to do that. And that's a little bit about database functions. Again, I'll probably do separate videos about different variations of these functions, although the entire core system is going to be here. I already did dget, but I'll probably do this dsum, dcount, all of these too. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover in this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.